aluminum. I get into the last classification of bacteria. It's called bifidobacteria. And in particular, Craig, can I see that bottle? Oh, there it is right there. This, how do you say this? Bioraculus? Bioraculus is probably biomiraculous. Because when I look at this under probiotics, it's got Bifidobacteria longum and Bifidobacteria bifidum. And it turns out when I ran the sequences on these two, aluminum went from number 1 to number 43. Now I'm dealing with 64 minerals. Yttrium always sits at 64. It went from 64 to 23. Come right up off the bottom, 2/3 of the way up, and I'm like going, well, where do we get this Bifidobacteria longum? Well, it turns out it's the number 1 bacteria your mother give you in breast milk. And it inoculates your intestinal tract so you can absorb things like iodine, selenium, magnesium. And without B. longum, and without Bifidobacteria infantis and Bifidobacteria bifidum, your body can't use yttrium going from one end to the other because it never gets out of the alimentary canal. It's considered, quote, inert. It's a marker. But what I found is that if you want to enhance the life cycle of B. longum or B. bifidum, you need to use oatmeal. Now I came up with that in a genetic sense because when I took a look at life forms I consume, I wanted to get the aluminum-based life forms brought down, and I wanted to bring up the yttrium-based life forms, and it turns out that oatmeal is a primary yttrium life. And I said, well, that's interesting. And then last year, researchers said if you want to colonize the large intestine for Bifidobacteria longum, eat oatmeal. And if you go into my book, where Minerals for the Gene Code, and you look up yttrium, you'll find that you get it from black cherries. Not red cherries, not Montmorency cherries, not sweet cherries, not maraschino cherries, not out of a martini and not out of a Dairy Queen, black cherries. Has trace amounts of yttrium in it, and if you use black cherry juice, Bifidobacteria longum, and oatmeal, you can successfully bring up the colonies of this bacteria. So when I was looking at, well, gosh, you know, that's quite an interesting little thing here. What does it really do? Well, proteins are what we're all made out of. Minerals give it a 3-dimensional structure. You got to have the right electron valence. You got to have the right amounts to do all this. In the machinery of making a protein, it's like a train in Canada. It's got an engine, it's got a caboose, and it's got a cargo. It could be a long train, it could be a short train, but it's still going to have an engine, it's still going to have a caboose. Well, the engine is methionine, and the fuel is selenomethionine. Oh, we're back to selenium again, I'm sorry. I thought I covered that already. Now we're going to talk about the cabooses. There's 3 flavors of a caboose. I'll try to get these 3 flavors up here just as soon as possible. Turns out that hydrogen is a caboose. Hydrogen, oxygen, water. All you got to do is not drink water and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble with protein production. Sulfur, the 4th, 5th most abundant element in the body, has to be there as a stopping point. And when I mean a stopping point, DNA says, my cell sensor said we need to make this, and this is being made, and right at the very end, if the caboose isn't there, it ain't going to make it. If hydrogen is deficient and you're dehydrated, that protein don't get made. If you don't have enough sulfur in your body, if it calls for a stopping point of sulfur, it's not going to be made. But since hydrogen's number 1 and sulfur's number 6, and you can't find yttrium in the human body, what do you think the number 1 limiting mineral for protein production would be? It's going to be the stopping points affiliated with yttrium, and when you give dogs yttrium, they live 3 times as long. It's just amazing. What you're getting is you're fulfilling DNA replication. It doesn't have to make a protein 5, 6, 50 times, burn that gene out, go to another gene that costs more energy. Go to another gene that costs more energy. You want it to be made right the very first time. Yttrium fits the bill. Now, do you get yttrium in the body? No, you got Bifidobacteria longum, Bifidobacteria bifidum. Guess what? They're like us. They eat and they poop, and we absorb bacteria poop. Your whole digestive tract is set up to feed these bacteria. And if you do so much as one antibiotic pill, you might go into what I call genetic starvation. Because a bacteria you need is no longer there pooping out the right material for you to regenerate. And you can have genetic insufficiency in the presence of the best food in the world. Now, you've got to have hydrochloric acid, you've got to have pancreatic enzymes, you've got to have gallbladder fluids. All that stuff is there. High acid content, and then the acid gets all pulled out, then it goes to alkaline. But what does it do? It makes favorable for a 28-foot tube to grow bacteria. And all you're doing is feeding that bacteria. Question?
What form of sulfur do you get?
What form of sulfur do you get? I like mine from eggs and asparagus. What makes your pee smell terrible after you eat asparagus is called thiosulfates. That's what gives the urine, the strong urine, from eating asparagus is the thiosulfates. Sulfur is in a lot of things. We have a lot of bacteria that actually work on sulfur. Eat some eggs and go to church and see if people appreciate those bacteria. Question?
There's one food group that we use a lot. It's called mochi. And it's a Japanese food that's been used for centuries. We use it in macaroni cooking. That is a food that helps strengthen the muscle activity of the small intestines in our food group.
Is it sulfur-based, is it? The sulfur, a lot of sulfur?
I'm not sure. I have to look that up.
Okay, mochi, but molasses. Just think of molasses, because if you think of molasses, people instantly say, well, would that be sulfated or unsulfated?
If it's made from brown rice source.
Okay. She's talking about a brown rice source, and if you notice, we're having food wars over rice. And this may be harder to get. I could get into a lot of the things that I see as important in various things. I'm just doing the mineral thing. But to get the yttrium to grow in your system, to provide all the stopping points for protein production, those of you that ever mess around with a computer and burn a CD, if you ever do not say close the CD, and you take that CD out and stick it in something else to play, there's no data available because you didn't close the CD. When you make a protein, you have to have a stopping point. And the single most limiting stopping point would be yttrium. Now, in the real world of genetics, I've got a mineral chart that's got every mineral showing subatomic particles hooked up to an amino acid. And in the genetic fields, they have one mineral hooked up to this chart. And where I have yttrium, the geneticists have selenium. Keep going back to this selenium again. But what I can tell you is when the Chinese, they like their rats, they put a little yttrium in the water, the selenium absorption of the good selenium, the selenomethionine, is profound and it goes everywhere. Just a little bit of yttrium in the drinking water makes the selenium content of all aspects go up. If you add yttrium to the soil of a dill plant, and a dill is a yttrium-based plant, the selenium levels of the plant go right through the roof. So yttrium, Bifidobacteria longum, and selenium are very, very important. And the people that are Bifidobacteria longum deficient and selenium deficient are the people that you look at and you say, that guy's got to be 80, and he's 48. He's burned out his DNA. His DNA code is 48 chronologically. How many moons have gone by, but it has nothing to do with how he's burned out his DNA. I'm going to talk about one more mineral, then I'm going to give my vocal cords a break, and I'm going to let you talk to Susie, and then this gentleman has got some good stuff, and I believe there's some D-mannose back there. Minerals for tumor-suppressing genes, the whole book comes down to this: iodine, selenium, magnesium, boron, vitamin D3. If you have that, your DNA code will operate, and it'll get the rest of your stuff out of the food. I'll say it again: iodine, selenium, magnesium, boron, and vitamin D3. Good old sunlight. And when there is a substitute for sunlight, it is organic vitamin D3. You cannot live without it. There's more vitamin D receptors in your brain than any other part of the body. There's more vitamin D receptors. Oh, iodine, selenium, magnesium, boron, vitamin D3. Now, the next mineral is a very complicated mineral. It's vitamin B12. And the active ingredient of B12 is called cobalt. And cobalt on this chart here is surrounded by 5 minerals above and 5 minerals below, called isotopes. And without B12, you cannot pull in iron, manganese, chromium, nickel, copper, zinc, germanium, titanium, vanadium. You just can't get them in. Simple as that. B12 is the link between metal and non-metal. And if you don't have that link, you don't get in. There is genetic testing that you can have done. So one time in a lifetime, do I have the good genes? Do I have genes that don't work? For your entertainment, I have a company that will check 19 genes that deal with glutathione peroxidase, which is selenium, genes that deal with vitamin D3, and genes that deal with vitamin B12. Here's our cobalt trace mineral connection. To the right, you'll see cobalt, and then you'll see all the trace minerals to the left, which again is titanium, vanadium, chromium, manganese, iron, nickel, copper, zinc, gallium, germanium. And there's multiple electron valences. This is very confusing until you find out that we only use positive 2. Take all the other minerals that have these electron differences, and you can just get rid of them with possibly the exception of copper. Sometimes we use a copper plus 2, copper plus 3, but everything else is just flat out positive 2. And how do you keep these minerals behaving? What's the opposite of positive 2? Selenium! Well, we're back to selenium again. So selenium has a profound effect on all the trace minerals as long as vitamin B12 can do its job. Without B12 to bring it in, selenium can't make it behave. If selenium is not there, you can have iron overload. That's called hemochromatosis. And not all hemochromatosis are genetic. It's just an imbalance in the system, allowing iron to overload. Copper toxicity, that's Wilson's disease. Chromium deficiency, type 2 diabetes. Can't get the insulin across the cell wall. Chromium picolate does wonders to help that. Vanadium, again, another type 2 diabetic mineral deficiency. Zinc, the glue to the human body. If there is a glue, it is a super glue, and it is zinc. What holds DNA together is called zinc fingers. Does it tell you it has anything to do with zinc? It sure does. It's zinc. Zinc fingers holds DNA together. Germanium possibly is involved with what's called Raynaud's phenomena, when your hands turn blue. A lot of research out of Japan that says germanium 135 or 134. It has, again, without B12, all of these minerals don't get in, they don't get out, they don't work. And if you ain't got selenium there, any one of these minerals can become heavy minerals, and they can get out of balance with each other. And hair analysis will show this. And have your hair done. If you see your hair full of mercury, lead, cadmium, and the selenium is down, who cares what the rest of the chart says? You get yourself loaded up with selenium, get the lead, mercury, cadmium out of your system, and then see what happens to the rest of them. Because if the heaviest, most important mineral is iodine, and selenium is number 2, and selenium is the engine that drives the DNA chain, and it's the caboose, 1 out of 3, and you're lacking that. It's usually men. They spend their whole lives trying to give it to their girlfriends or wives. Number 1 mineral loss in semen is men. Yes, ma'am. Iodine is clarification. No, never said it. It never said use any potassium iodide or iodine. There's 2 types of iodine and iodide. And you want them to be potassium free, so they'll go in and pick up potassium primarily through liver action and regulate the liver. The -1 and -2 control the whole mineral gamut. And if you take iodine and potassium in, it's got to cleave off that potassium. Where is it going? It's going to end up in the liver. Chocolate cysts, fibrocystic tumors. The #1 tumor in women is fibrocystic potassium pockets. Caffeine toxicity, iodine, selenium deficiency. Primarily an iodine deficiency. Yes, ma'am. I'm saying use potassium-free iodine, iodide. Iodine and iodide. Standard process makes an iodine product called, it has iodine and iodide called promoline. The United States government says take 0.1 milligrams so you will not die. Well, that's just about all you'll do, is just about not die. Brownstein and others say anywhere between 1 and 10 milligrams a day. Use 50 for detoxification to push the fluorines, chlorines, and bromines out. Let iodine gain control of your DNA. I got to take a few minutes break, Steve. Okay. Okay, yes, I do consults on Wednesday and Friday afternoons from 12 until 5 or 6. Usually the first time takes about an hour to get to know you, where you've been, what you're doing, what your chronic problems are, what you've been taking, what you've tried, what doesn't work. You wouldn't call me if everything's been working. I usually talk to people that things that don't work, which is fine with me. I don't mind resolving issues. If I don't know what it is, I have lots of resources. I like to talk to brainiacs that like to think like this, and I have a few that I do. I have available for you outside of this building hair analysis kits. If you would wish to have your hair analyzed, I use the standard toxicology report. I don't go deep into what doctor's data offers me. I just have you get the toxic report, which gives us 25 minerals that we're worried about. From antimony to chromium to uranium to tungsten. And it's absolutely surprising what I find. I have children, 2 and 3 years old, that have tungsten levels through the roof. They have unbelievable heavy metals, lead, arsenic. It's just amazing what our environment has infiltrated into our DNA sequencing. So the first thing we try to do is get rid of these heavy metals so DNA can best express itself. What goes up must come down. And I'm not sure what's coming down. I also have for your entertainment, brand new to the chiropractic field, and I'm the only chiropractic genetic researcher there is, 19 prominent genes that deal with vitamin D, homocysteine, vitamin B12, vitamin D3, and a few tumor suppressing genes to find out if you have a good gene or if you have an offshoot gene. All right? No two human beings alike. Most of the genes are pretty universal, but sometimes our ancestors have given us genes that will have much greater requirements for nutritional supplementation. So when I say someone needs 200 micrograms, if they don't have a good glutathione peroxidase gene, they might have to put glutathione peroxidase into the system. There was a real fascinating article came to my attention called, it was on Barbara Walters interreading a Dr. David Sinclair. Dr. David Sinclair is the head of the pathology department at Harvard Medical School. He also likes to make money. He put a company together and found out what makes Reversitol work. You might as well call this stuff Reversitol because it reverses heart disease, it reverses diabetes, it reverses about every aging thing you can think of. Fascinated me. So I got on the internet and I got the genetic sequence of Reversitol. And when I ran the sequence, in the top 5 minerals needed were yttrium, a stopping point, hydrogen a stopping point, and aluminum. And it's the first gene that I've seen that actually allows aluminum and yttrium to be utilized. And the fact that the highest amounts of these stopping points for protein production means that this gene affects everything downstream from it. It's like having a dam. Everything downstream from the dam is going to be affected. You open the gate, more water goes down. But this particular gene regulates hydrogen, yttrium, and aluminum in one sweep. Just like vitamin D, there are a couple of types of this stuff. We have a nation flooded with vitamin D2, vitamin D3 deficient. It requires sunlight in the ultraviolet range for vitamin D3, and it's a nanometer. It's so small you can't see it. It's the 190 to 220 nanometers. And I had to laugh. A lady says, "What light can I get?" And I says, "Ma'am, if you turned the light on, you wouldn't even know it was on." She goes, "Oh, well, why?" I said, it's in the ultraviolet range. So when the sun is in the southern hemisphere, we're not even getting these nanometers. Yet we're gobbling down our vitamin D fortified everything. We've got more vitamin D2 than we know what to do with. We've got no vitamin D3. We have no vitamin D3 conversion. And we have cancer overtaking heart disease, and in great part by vitamin D3 deficiency. Most disease are latitude illnesses. How far away from the equator are you will determine the type of diseases you'll get and how prevalent they'll be in society, like MS, like cancer. Reversidol, or Revesterol, there are two types. There is what's known as a cis reversitol and a trans reversitol. So when I learned about this, I got on the internet and I found out for $16.99 I could get 2 bottles of Reversitol from Puritan's Pride. And then I called up the one guy where I get all of my stuff from, Biotics Research, outside of Standard Process, and he wants, at my cost, $140 for 300 pills. And I said, well, there's got to be something up, or Harry wouldn't be selling this stuff at this outrageous price. I go, Harry, why shouldn't I buy Puritan's Pride for $16 instead of your $130? He goes, well, there's 2 forms, Rich. And I go, yeah, cis and trans. He goes, well, then you already know the answer. We have to have trans. It takes 5 days of sunlight and a grape to make it convert. So the stuff you see in the market that's a dime a dozen, you're going to take, and it's like taking vitamin D2, except it's not going to go to your skin and in 5 days of sunlight convert into the trans form. You've got to take it in the trans form to get the anticipated results. The really good stuff is very expensive. The 19 genes that I could have tested for you, the first gene is called LPL, which stands for lipoprotein lipase. This stuff is expressed in the heart, muscle, and fat tissue. It has a lot to do with the triglyceride levels. If you've got a good working gene, you can probably take very easy stuff to control your triglycerides. If you've got a bad working gene, you have to work around it. Now, this article, I've started on to the genes you can have tested, and I'm going to go back to Reversitol, and I'm going to tell you why I think Reversitol works really good. You can type in every disease you know in Reversitol. I think there's 1,100 research articles in PubMed right now, but what I found was Reversitol lowers glutathione levels. Remember, glutathione is the stuff that works with selenium? And I'm back to selenium again and again. Well, here's what happens. Revesterol lowers glutathione levels. Well, does that sound bad? Depends what's happening to the glutathione. I could have a bucket of water, but if I'm not drinking and I'm not using it, I can have all the glutathione in my blood, but if my body is not using it, it don't mean anything. And it turns out that Revesterol makes glutathione work, which makes selenium work. The glutathione levels drop because it's going to work. It's having a big workforce waiting to do something. The workforce is depleted because everything is active and everything is being utilized. So, reversatol is a selenium glutathione enhancer. If you could run your car engine on STP without having problems, which means you would have less friction. This just makes selenium work a lot better. And it does it through the messenger levels of thioxidase, glutathione reductase, glutathione S-transferase, superoxide dimutase 1, and catalase. Very, very good stuff, this reversatol. The expensive one. Another gene marker for inflammation is a gene called IL-6. It's a pro-inflammatory gene. IL-6 and IL-12 will kill you if the bird flu ever jumps species. Because your body says, holy mackerel, and it produces something that it thinks is going to take care of this gene virus, except you actually die from your body's attempt to get rid of it. It produces all these pro-inflammatories, and you perish very quick. And that is the biggest fear about the bird flu mutating, is that it'll turn on all your pro-inflammatory genes. The fastest way to age is to have inflammation. Inflammation is a marker of genetic distress. Homocysteine is a marker of the amount of damage your DNA has. Homocysteine binds up methionine. Selenomethionine is the fuel that runs the engine to produce a protein. And if all your methionine is tied up into homocysteine, you ain't got no fuel for your engine and it gets clogged up. So it never hurts to see if you have a lot or working genes of the IL-6. The next one, glutathione S-transferase. Now, if you want to know about your -1 iodine levels, you get a bunch of blood tests and you find out if T3, T4, your thyroid stimulating hormone. You can check your copper levels. You can check your amino acid levels of tyrosine. That's iodine stuff. But when you're talking the second most important mineral, selenium, you got to talk about glutathione and one gene called GSTP1, which stands for glutathione S-transferase. These are enzymes that are important for detoxification. If you've got a good working one, no sweat. If it's not, you need to know about that. Another one is GSTM1. This is another glutathione amino acid. And basically it's the same thing. If you go to my YouTube and type in selenium and health and you listen to Gerhard Schroeder, he states that there are 25 encoded selenium proteins just for your brain. And that if you put your favorite lab animal on a complete selenium deficient diet, you can measure the levels of selenium dropping in all tissues except the brain. Glutathione levels in the brain never go low until there is absolutely no selenium. Period. It'll expend your legs, it'll expend your arms, it'll expend your liver, organs, bowels. It don't care if you get cancer, but if the light goes out, if the Duracell battery quits running inside your head, which is selenium based, you got a problem. The next one is called COL1A1, pro-alpha 1 chain of type 1 collagen. This is a connective bone, cornea, dermatis, which is skin, and tendon gene. And if you can't walk without hurting because your muscles and tendons and all these things hurt, it's because you're probably vitamin B1 deficient. If I walked from here to my host house, I'd be sore for a day. But people that are organic B1 deficient will be sore for days or may never get on sore because when they make lactic acid from using energy in muscles, a byproduct is a compound called lactic acid that makes your muscles hurt. To revert lactic acid back into workable forms requires monothiamine, vitamin B1, and you need vitamin B1. This gene has the activity to help cartilage, skin, bone, and stuff work. There are different transcripts of this gene. There's one good and one bad, and you may need to know if you have that. And every one of these you just would like to know if you have the working models, the good models or the bad models. This is a cholesterol gene, CETP, cholesterol ester transfer protein. When this one don't go right, you may have high cholesterols. Of course, you could have a good working gene and have high cholesterol, and what are you lacking? Vitamin D3. Cholesterol is a chain. It's just one chemical in a chain of chemicals, and unless cholesterol gets turned into, say, testosterone or aldosterone or wherever else it goes because it doesn't have vitamin D3, you can have artificial high cholesterol levels strictly from being vitamin D3 deficient. And then when you go to the doctor and they say your cholesterol levels are high, you need to take these pills here to lower your cholesterol. It may lower your cholesterol, but it's going to take all the fat out of your brain. And when you get the fat in your brain too low, you lose your bromine. And when you lose your bromine, you get kind of shaky over the deal. You get that Parkinson's.
Dihydrotestosterone, how does that come into play, for using?
How does what now?
Dihydrotestosterone, how does that come into
High testosterone? Dihydrotestosterone?
It's oxidative testosterone, how does that implicate in CETP?
I don't think I can answer that question on that. This one doesn't have any variation, it's just is yours working? Come on, let's get opened up here. Alloprotein C3. It's a low-density lipoprotein. Now remember, we got proteins that have got to be three-dimensional. We got minerals making it three-dimensional. We got to have sugars to give it energy. D-mannose is one of the sugars. Glucose, galactose. There's 8 sugars, just like there's 8 octaves. They're right. There's 8 different sugars, just like there's 8 octaves of minerals. A lot of people can't make D-mannose because it's yttrium-based. But you got to have oils. Oils, the squeaky bearing always gets the grease. And the human body is no different. It'll take the squeak out of the worst thing and leave other things without oil. You've got to have lots of oils. You've got to have your lipoproteins. They've got to be 3 carbons, 6 carbons, 12 carbons, 15 carbons. This is what you get from flaxseed oil. It greases everything up, makes the machinery move smooth. If you get too much of 6, you're going to hurt. It makes you swell up and hurt. 3s and 9s bring your inflammation down. But all machineries need oils, and I don't want to play light of the oils as we need it. We can throw all the minerals and stuff in there, but if you ain't got nothing greasing the track up, things come to a grinding halt in a big quick. In a big hurry. The question is, what oils do we avoid? Hydrogenated oils. If you take genetically modified corn oil and bubble hydrogen through it, you got margarine. Margarine is about 1 molecule away from plastic, and when it goes into you, it can turn to plastic called atherosclerosis. So I promote heavily butter, coconut oil. I do not promote canola oil. That is a genetically modified mustard plant that's producing these oils for you. I do not promote lecithin anymore, unless the can of lecithin says made from genetically modified free soybean oil. And how do you find GMO free? I wrote Now Products a letter and says, hey, I just love your lecithin. I just need one letter off your desk saying it's GMO free. Well, I got words back going, we've fractioned it down so much it doesn't matter. I go, can you put that in writing? Nope, they didn't want to put that in writing either. So I go, well, thank you very much, because I was a lecithin junkie in college. Acetylcholine A is what the brain runs on. You eat a bunch of lecithin. What it doesn't use on the spot turns into acetylcholine A. You can stay up all night and still remember what you studied last night. And it takes your short-term memory to long-term memory. I'd do 8, 10, 12 lecithin pills before I'd study all night, and I'd have tons of energy. And I'd take a test, and my short-term to long-term memory did really good. Because it fuels the brain, it really makes it work. But now I can't tell you to take lecithin for fear it's genetically modified soybean oil. 2 years ago, last Saturday, we were going to have stuffed Cornish hens on my birthday, and our 7-grain loaf of bread, and I look at it, and the second ingredient was soybean oil. And I go, uh-oh. And I immediately turn to her and I go, what's this doing here? Like she's supposed to know, like, don't you read the labels? We've only been eating that stuff for 5 years. And she goes, why? And I go, look at the ingredient list, soybeans number 2. And she's like, I didn't know. So I said, I'll take it back to our local IGA store, and I read every label in IGA, and every loaf of bread has soybean oil in it now. I couldn't find a loaf of bread that either doesn't have soybean and or bromine. And the town I live in, you cannot buy a loaf of bread that's fit to eat unless you come to my health food store and buy Ezekiel bread. You just can't do it. It's just not there. Yes, ma'am. Question.
The vitamin E's are made from soybean oil. Even Carlson admits that their soybean oil is medically engineered.
Okay, the question is on vitamin E coming from soybean oil. You will not find vitamin E in my health food store unless you buy a jar of wheat germ oil, because all 8 vitamin E's are found in wheat germ oil. D-alpha tocopherol was widely available. A company that is out of business is called Eastman Kodak. It was part of the film industry. It was a byproduct. Like all good business people, they took their byproduct and pushed it on the American public as something we need. D-alpha tocopherol runs all the other vitamin E's out of your body. Only gamma tocopherol allows you to pull in the 7 other vitamin E's. So if you do go out and buy vitamin E, buyer beware. A, is it genetically modified? B, is it high in gamma tocopherol? And see, if you're worried and don't want to worry about it, then just go buy wheat germ oil and hope your wheat wasn't GMO. Olive oil, wonderful stuff. Live on it. What I like, and it's the most expensive, but it's my favorite, is I cook my organic popcorn in Brazil nut oil because it has selenium. And this stuff is $5 a bottle my cost, and I use a half a bottle every time I make popcorn, and it makes the popcorn taste so good. It's a meal. Now, if you're looking for organic sources of selenium, it is Brazil nuts, organic turkey gizzards, organic chicken gizzards, and after that, it's buyer beware. Where did your bread come from? What did they stick on the fields? Where were the fields at when the bread was made? If you listen to that Selenium in Health from Gerhard Schroeder, they'll tell you that they checked bread up in Maine and it was devoid of it, and they did it out in Des Moines, Iowa when it was high. And they asked him a question. They says, what about selenium levels? And he says, don't need to even have your levels of selenium checked. It's directly related to your diet. Now, I try to have an original thought every day, and somebody said to me when I was doing a speech in Pennsylvania, they said, we'd like you to be on this council. And I go, who else is on it? And I go, well, you. And they says, come up with something new. And I says, all right, why don't we take a look at this Flintstone sodium selenate paradox we're in. We got to have selenium. We give our children Flintstone vitamins, and they're getting sodium selenate, and we need selenomethionine, and our body can convert about maybe 5-10% of that stuff on a good day, as long as our homocysteine levels aren't raised, because we need to make selenomethionine. We need to make selenomethionine, and if you're vitamin B12 deficient and your homocysteine levels are up and your methionine levels are all bound into homocysteine, you can't make it. But if you can make it, that tells me you should have 2 types of selenium in your blood, selenomethionine and sodium selenate. Oh, well, that'll be easy. I'll just call the lab and find out where I can get it. If anybody finds a lab that does that, please let me know, because I haven't found one yet. I says, how do you test for your selenium? They said, well, we just do this, and we put a little nitric acid in there, and if it turns red, it's there. I said, you mean if it turns red, it's there? You can't tell the difference between selenomethionine and sodium selenate? They go, no, should we? The lab technicians only do what their bosses tell them to do, and nobody has even developed a blood test to find out if you're high in one and low in the other. It's like vitamin D, vitamin D3, vitamin D2, vitamin D3. So if somebody comes in and they're just so loaded up on Flintstone vitamins that their fingernails and their hair is falling out, they have selenium poisoning of the wrong kind, do I give them good selenium? Well, if you do, you just hope your malpractice covers what you're doing, because when something goes haywire, they might not like you, because their medical doctor says, why would you give that person selenium? They're already poisoned. So my next question was, have another day and another original thought. What are we going to do to bring the selenium levels down? And I think the answer is Trillium. Just give them garlic. Let the Trillium bind up this inorganic selenium and pull it down.
Just walk out.
Garlic that has Trillium gives a really bad breath. Unless you eat it with the person, and neither one of you know it. So these are some questions that I need to have answered. Who's going to be the first person that will come up with a blood test that says, well, your sodium selenate levels are right through the roof, your organic selenium levels are non-existent. No wonder you're having so many problems. Your methionine levels are all ruined, your B12 levels are all tied up. You're showing severe signs of inflammation, and that's where this started, because inflammation is the hallmark of distress DNA. So when you get these genetic tests, you're trying to find out, do I have good working genes across the board, or do I need to know more about 2, 5, or 10 of these genes that I may have to encounter some other way than just conventional ways. And we have the ability to order that test up for you. It's 19 genes. And I can go through those genes, but I just tell you right now, they're B12, homocysteine levels, D3, selenium, and your fats and oils, which should be, yes, question?
How much is that test?
Susie, what's the test on that? 190? 190, that includes an hour consult with me after the test comes back. So one time, it's not like hair analysis where you do something and say, here's the proof of the pudding, I now look better. This is a one-time test to know where these key 20 proteins are added in the body.
Is this the one?
No, that's hair analysis.
So where do I get the...
All we can do is, this is so new that I put 20 hours of prep into just getting this piece of paper and 19 other ones presentable to you, because this was broke on a chiropractic headline about 3 weeks ago. And to my knowledge, I'm the only chiropractor that does genetic research. And I've called up the president of those 14 chiropractic colleges. I've talked to 3 of them and said, who's doing genetic research? Because I need to talk to them. And they go, are you? And what I found out is I get the table of contents to over 100 medical journals worldwide. In every discipline in the healing arts except podiatry, chiropractic, have a journal every month that produces all the genetic research. When this gene is broken, you have this problem. Every time I encounter that gene, I convert that gene to minerals, copy the article it came down, and I catalog it. And I've got thousands of human genes cataloged. Let's see. Hair testing, gene testing, blood testing. If if you have spine-related problems, because I am a chiropractor, I was the first chiropractor in the United States to go on hospital staff, admit people, release them, and I opened every chiropractic hospital so chiropractors can order CAT scans, MRIs, and X-rays. That's a long story, but it started in 1984 in the smallest hospital in Michigan, which was Onaway, Michigan. And they were starving to keep the doors open, and I started referring to that hospital on a basis through a medical doctor. And as politics go in America, you treat the majority of the board of the hospital, then you ask for permission, you'll get it. And when I said I needed X-rays, I treated 5 of the 9 people on the board in the past 5 before. So I did referrals to the hospital, and there was a hospital in Detroit that was proposing chiropractic referral to what was called the New Center, and I took their paperwork, whitened it out, put it Onaway Hospital, took it back to the board, and said, no, I'm doing it down there, I need to do co-admission here. So I did co-admission from 84 to 89. Well, this little tiny hospital, I couldn't keep it afloat. Nobody could keep it afloat. And there was a bidding war between Sheboygan and Petoskey. Sheboygan won. Hospital's closed. I picked the phone up and I said, I'd like to get a CAT scan on Mrs. Smith. And they go, well, who's this? And I said, it's Dr. Olry. And they go, well, where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Onaway. I'm a chiropractor. He said, well, I don't think you take your kind. And I said, well, I was on the Onaway hospital staff, putting people in and out, getting X-rays. And I said, do we have a discrimination problem here? Oh, just a second, sir. And about 20 minutes later, he comes back and he says, where would you like the requisition form sent to? Who are we talking about? And the attitude changed. Y'all done?
Could I try to get the batteries again and see if it shut off or something? Batteries. Sorry about this.
So that went along really good, and I was getting my X-rays about 35 miles away. And I started getting letters from Saginaw St. Mary's. We've got a new MRI machine, Dr. Olive MD. I have the most butchered name you've ever seen. And so I called down there, and I sent 5 names through. So Dr. Olive MD sent 5 people through the hospital, and I called down there and I said, you getting paid? They said, absolutely. And I said, well, by the way, it's Dr. Olry, DC. Well, no problem. We changed the paperwork like that. So now I'm getting X-rays and CAT scans from Sheboygan. I did co-admission. I'm now using Saginaw St. Mary's. I got MRI. I went into Alpena one day and I said, here's a signed release. I'd like to see these X-rays. And I just about got hauled out by the state police. And I went back there a year later and says, you know, I'm getting my CAT scans here and my X-rays here, and all these people I'm sending all over the countryside. Are you interested in looking at my stuff? And you know what the radiologist said? Are they getting paid? Yeah. And I go, of course they're getting paid. Absolutely, Dr. Olry. So then I called up Gaylord Hospital. I sent somebody through there. I called up Munson, put somebody through that hospital. I called up Northern Michigan. I run somebody through that hospital. And now I have 7 hospitals opened up at my convenience, and I start going to seminars where chiropractors were learning how to look at these things, and I'd go make friends with the instructor when the thing was going on, and they'd say, well, how many people have ordered an MRI? You know, like 10 of them. And about 5 people would raise their hand, and they'd go, well, how many ordered 20? And nobody would raise their hands, and then he'd say, well, Dr. Olry, how come you didn't raise your hand? I go, you haven't hit the 5,000 mark yet. And I have ordered and read more MRIs than any chiropractor except chiropractic radiologists that do nothing but look at this now. But there was a time that I was strictly reading these when nobody else was. So I've done my best to bring up the awareness of the public to many health issues. I've done my best to bring the standard of living up for chiropractors that have problems that just don't have to say, well, I guess you'll have to go somewhere else. I give them the option and the tools to know what's wrong with that person, to know if they need to send to a neurosurgeon or an orthopedic surgeon, or whether they need to remain under your care. And in this respect, what I'm doing with genetic research is making available the knowledge of what it takes to make protein reactions, and how to protect yourself, how to walk into a health food store and look at 9,000 things for sale and say, well, we better start with iodine, and then you can rule out 4,000. Better have the right selenium. You're now down to 50. And then to say we better have some oils in there, now you're down to 20. And when it comes to go out to eat, who could go to a restaurant? I can't go to a restaurant and eat. I have to walk in and tell them, you better call an ambulance if there's anything in there that has to do with sorbate 80, margarine, white bread, bromine, or genetically modified. I'm going to lay on the ground and have a heart attack and die, and you better call the ambulance right now. And I go into restaurants and I go, I'm really hungry. I'd like some eggs and toast, but I can't have bromated bread and I can't have margarine. Can you use butter? And do you have, some type of whole wheat? And they go, well, we can try to get it all off the grill. I go, that'll probably be good enough.
Were you referring to polysorbate 80?
Polysorbate 80. I had a lady, there's a company that makes liquid minerals. And everybody that's at a multi-level company that has minerals, every time I go somewhere, they see themselves sitting in the Clearwater Beach having a martini because I'm selling their minerals. And they brought me this bottle that was orange. And it didn't really vibrate in my hand, although the name was very similar. And I read the ingredient list, and I'm like going, well, if you got benzene in the same bottle as ascorbic acid, a benzoic, sodium benzoate, and vitamin C turns into benzene. This stuff is outlawed in a lot of countries, but it's not outlawed in our country. So I get lots of stuff. People, what do you think about this? Has got every berry from Africa. This one's got every berry from Central America. This has got gallstones from the fish of the Arctic Circle. And if it's got sodium or potassium benzoate and vitamin C in there, I go, look, it's carcinogenic. I don't want to see it again. Thank you very much. Take it at your own risk. If you get sick, I'll help you. So I look at that, and this is what I try to do, is to say, this is the good stuff you need, and this is the bad stuff you need. And these are the minerals you need to keep DNA functioning, so you don't end up going and finding out how sick you can get from the environment we live in. I'm running out of breath. Does anybody have any questions? Nobody has any questions. Yes?
What's your telephone number and date available?
My telephone number is 989-742-4242. This number rings in my life 24 hours a day. It rings in the office, it rings at home, it rings in my sleep. Because the phone's right next to my bed. I run an acute care clinic. That's how I make my living. I do not make my living at a health food store. That's how Susie makes her living. I refer to the store. I just own it. 989-742-4242. My webpage is emineral.info, I-N-F-O, emineral.info. And on that website, there are speeches I've given in the past 3 years. There's a 4-hour DVD. There's 2 or 3 other hour-long speeches I've given at organic farming conventions. And I'm happy to tell you I am going to Hawaii. Somebody is paying me to drive to the local airport. I'm going to the Big Island of Hawaii for 10 days. My roommate is the research director for Prevention Magazine. I'm going to sit in, they're renting a farm, and they're putting the 4 speakers on a farm for 5 days prior to the Hawaiian Organic Association's annual meeting, and we're each given a 4-hour block to talk about it. I anticipate my next book to be done in print and in my hands by the time I go there, because I'm going to use that forum as a launching point for that book, like I've used this launching point to offer genetic testing.
And when is that?
October 11th and 12th, I'll be leaving this state and heading to Hawaii. And I've been invited, I don't have the date confirmed, to the Mexican Organic Apple Growers Association. And I understand that's in November. And I said, where do you grow apples in Mexico? And he says, well, we've got mountains. And you go halfway up the mountains, 100 miles from Mexico, and they provide all the apples for Mexico.
What city in Mexico is it?
It's 100 miles from Mexico. They did not give me a name. I give a speech at the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, and Neil Kinsey was speaking in a 2-day seminar, and then I spoke to his group after they were over. I put on this kind of a seminar for 3 hours, and this one guy invited me, and so we're still working out the details. Question?
Are there good organic farms in Michigan and fruit farms
Yes, buy locally. I'm not from the Detroit area, but I do know there's a lot of people in this room that buy lots of organic. I know that the Thumb area has the Greater Thumb Organic Growers Association, and they grow all their beans. And I spoke at their convention here maybe about 10 weeks ago, and what I found out is that they grow all their beans, and you know who buys it? The wealthy people of Japan. There isn't any of their product that, I mean, you can get it, but they're getting, the average bean, say, is going for $12, maybe it's a ton, I don't know the exact, but they're getting $18 a ton because it's certified organic, and all of these beans are going out of the country.
We can't buy them?
I didn't say you can't buy them, I'm telling you where they're selling them. When I did the speech, I go, it would be wonderful to think that all the organic farmers were growing for everybody, and the truth is they're growing for those that can afford it. And you know, to live a long life, you really can't go down to a lot of local supermarkets and anticipate getting organic, nutrition-dense food. And if you do have to live on that, you better know what minerals to supplement. Question? Oh, I'm sorry, Paul?
What is the best thing for circulation?
Walking. L-arginine has a profound impact on capillary resistance. Niacinamide, magnesium, selenium. O, oxygen. Exercise, E. And if you can't exercise, I've seen research done on L-arginine that if you can't even exercise your hands like this, taking L-arginine brings up the efficiency of your heart. That's demonstratable. L-arginine couples with selenium on a ductless gland on the heart, and it produces nitric oxide. The famous stuff Viagra shuttles around in your body. Except Viagra don't make more nitric oxide. Your body got old, and there are certain organs of fitness that are not to be used when you're low on nitric oxide, and you take the Viagra pill and you reshuttle your nitrogen for your psychological advantage, and you may have a heart attack and die in the act of exercising. L-arginine is the stuff, and if you have a problem with nitric oxide, you take L-arginine and selenium and you bring up your nitric oxide levels so that physical activity won't kill you.
Question. Okay, would you say that's an endothelial wall that's compromised when your nitric oxide production is diminished?
That's what I've read. The question was, is the endothelial walls being compromised? And yes, that's what I've read it is that. Any more questions? Well, we've got to pack our van and we got a 5-hour trip to get back home. Thank you for having me down here.